Hello! I know we don't get to see each other as much as we would like to, but when we do, I gotta say it's sort of wonderful.
To friendship.
To friendship.
It was inspired by a holiday that we had in Wales, where Bryan, who was suffering a bit of anxiety at the time, and who'd basically been dealing with that for about a year, and was pretty much had come to terms with what it was all about, and was sort of had been wrestling with it, but was over it. But he was very attuned to other blokes who were obviously going through a bit of an existential crisis and seemed to be in quicksand.
Done well, Frank. Real shame about that chimney. Just a tiny blip on paradise.
What the hell's that?
Frank!
What are you doing, Frank?
I hate you! No, you don't.
Why'd you come? We're here to celebrate the rational, mature, wise old bloke you've become.
They had now got to an age, moving into the last quarter of their lives, where work was no longer their identity, and how difficult that was for them to know who they were, what was their purpose, what were they supposed to live for, and to sort of get back in touch with sort of intrinsic values.
I should never have sold the business. Ever since I've sold it, I've felt dead.
I've been approached to play a grandmother.
Oh, no. 60's the new 40, you know.
Yeah, sure. From behind and in the dark.
Something that you've been able to achieve really beautifully here is, while there's that element of the blokes, is their partners are a very key part of it. They're very fleshed out characters. They're actually a very intrinsic part of this film and how it plays out, and beautifully written. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
I first found out about the film when I saw a tweet by Richard. It was celebrating your female-dominated crew. It's obviously something that you feel quite passionately about, but did you go to set a quota to achieve sort of 50-50 there, or how did you to get
No,
that
I felt
way?
passionate about it because I've struggled with being employed in this industry. Big time. I was 6 years before, in between my last job and doing Palm Beach, and that was not being choosy. That was just, I could not get a job. So I'm very aware of how dispiriting that is, and to have done the same training, have done the same, have sort of started in this industry with the same potential, and very often with short films with the same accolades, but then getting into the workforce and finding that the jobs over and over again keep going to the same guys. So once I got to that position, and I only got to it really because my husband offered me the job, I went, whoa, well, now is my opportunity to go to bring heads of department, female heads of department, with me.
Once you made that call, how easy was it to find those female heads?
Easy, so easy. There's so many talented women out there. Of course there is. Half the time it's just the opportunity, and the only where we fall back is where we just aren't getting the experience. We just don't have the runs on the boards that the guys get. So unless we I'm for affirmative action. I really think that we should be insisting that it is that we have 50-50 parity. And I certainly don't want it all women, but I do think that we should have the perspective of our culture and our filmmaking and our writing, whatever, should be from both male and female perspective, and minorities.
All those years he was married to his bloody business.
It got better.
It was much more than just a fling, what are you?
It's a cutthroat business, and it's incredibly competitive, and there's a small pot of money, and there's a lot of people after it, and we have to fight very hard for it, and the guys are fighting very hard for it too. So women have to be very fierce, as you pointed out.
Absolutely. So having that dynamic on set, so many women heads of department, yourself a writer as well as the director of the project, how is that experience so very different to when you first started in the industry?
Well, when I started in the industry, sort of in the early 80s, I was very often the only woman on set. And there was a few in the makeup trailer and in the wardrobe, but very often when I stepped on set, I was the only woman there. And it felt normal, because you could see that's what was normal. And it was really only when I moved to Australia and I realized that there were women here making films. There was Jane Campion, Gillian Armstrong, Sophia Turkowitz. There was a few women behind camera. And in a way, it set a rather distorted perspective, because I thought, oh, you can be a film director in Australia. I'll have a go. and which I then did, do my training and make short films, and then I got to the point of getting out there into the commercial arena where you realize, oh, it wasn't quite as clear-cut as it seemed to be from the perspective of seeing Jane and Gillian and Sophia.
But while it felt normal, I know you weren't always comfortable with how you were being portrayed or treated on set as a woman. I mean, obviously, you're an incredibly beautiful woman, you know, one of the top 10 beautiful in the world. But while it felt normal, I know you weren't always comfortable with how you were being portrayed or treated on set as a woman. I mean, obviously, you're an incredibly beautiful woman, you know, one of the top 10 beautiful in the world.
People must have loved you.
But the objectification and the sexualisation that your characters and potentially, I presume perhaps yourself, when you were doing that?
No, I would never say I was ever treated badly on set.
Okay, great.
But it was just the limitations of the roles. I mean, basically, it was the male gaze. It's the, you know, you are serving the male fantasy. Or at least the characters I was playing was serving the male fantasy. And you are within that trying to go, hello, there's a human being in here too. But that was not really interesting to them, and not interesting to the filmmaking machine, to Hollywood machine. You were to be objectified. Not always, but certainly if you were a European actress, there was no way you were going to be there for anything other than the sexual quotient.
Something I really admire about you is you mentioned going back and doing your training. You were 35, your son was 3 days old. I'm third trimester, I'm 35. I could not imagine going back and studying just a few days after having my child. What was that drive for you? What made you want to pursue that secondary career?
I think I'd seen a lot of women get a bit stuck after they had children, that they weren't trained up to get back into the workforce, and they hadn't done the studying, the education, the re-education to keep up. You know, you take those few years out to have children and to be a mum, it moves on very, very fast. So my thing was that I wanted that once my last child was ready to go to school, I was also ready to follow him out the door and be equipped to have a career.
What sort of changes would you like to see progressing throughout the career of actors coming into the industry now, and female actors and filmmakers, or actually women in general?
I think it's so different from when I was in the industry, and I think there is it's night and day. I mean, the roles for women out there now are, you know, really three-dimensional. I mean, there's some fantastic roles out there for women and older women. I think what we have to work on is making sure that we show the world through the female perspective a bit more, because we're still very much looking at the world through the male perspective. It's still, you know, Hollywood is still absolutely stacked towards the male heroes. There's too much machinery in the films. There's not enough of the human condition. There's not enough of the world from a female perspective. And there's not enough in government from a female perspective either. While we're at it.
Very good point. One of the great things you and Bryan do together is you show that men are a part of making all of this happen, obviously, him being there as a producer and working as a team. How important is that it's a coherent thing? It's not just women saying, hey, we need more of...
It's essential. If men aren't on board, there's no moving forward. I mean, you know, and it was the same with the suffrage movement. It wasn't until the men got on board that it really happened. The men will make it happen. And the men, when they realise it's a better world with the female perspective and you know, either step aside or make a bigger effort to give women the opportunity, we're nowhere. We have to have them on board, and more people like, you know, Bryan, bless his heart, are so on board about seeing the world from a female perspective.
I'd love to sit down when I can have wine with you and talk about this for ages, but I am out of time. May I ask maybe 3 words to really tease this film to people who might be watching this clip when we pop it on the site?
Funny. I do think there's some very funny moments, very silly moments. Relatable and beautiful.
Promise me that the next 10 years are going to be our best.
And cut. Lovely.